Hey, how's it going, guys? Welcome back to the African Comic Guy, and today we're about to talk about what the hell happened to Madam Web. I don't know if any of you have watched it. I did, and I left the theater extremely disappointed because I remember watching the trailer last year, and for some reason I had some really cool expectations. But yeah, I think 45 minutes into the movie, I knew how the movie was going to go, and at the end of this movie, it basically confirmed what I thought as I was watching this movie. It was a really bad movie. And, right now, we're about to talk about not only how bad it was, but there's so much blaming going around right now. Everybody's blaming everybody, studios blaming each other, writers blaming each other. So there's so much going on right now. But the bottom line is this was a really bad movie. It really was. And this is, if you don't know Madam Web, she basically is part of the Spider-Verse or the Spider-Man verse, So she's a character in this universe, alongside characters like Venom, you know what I mean? And so with Sony, obviously, Spider-Man is licensed through Sony or owned by Sony. They always collaborate with Marvel. So Sony was really looking to make a good movie, and all indications last year, especially moving up to the showing of this movie, was something they really took seriously. That's what we thought. So going into the movie, you're expecting a decent movie. Now they didn't really have a huge budget for this movie, but that doesn't lower expectations. To me, it just told me that with whatever budget they got from Sony, because again, this is going to be a female-led movie, okay? That we figured this would be a movie that would be well thought of, well put together, and give us a good story. But let me tell you, it was awful from the beginning all the way to the end, and I'm telling you, I was watching people walk out the theater. It was just that bad. And like I said, right now there's so much blaming going around. Dakota Johnson, who is the female lead in this movie, a lot of you know her from 50 Shades of Grey. I never watched it, but I've seen her in a bunch of movies. She's very, very good. She's a really good actress. And I liked her for the role. I really did. I liked the entire female-led cast. Even with Isabella Merced, who I really like because I've seen her in a lot of stuff. So I didn't really have a problem with the cast. This movie boiled down to, I've said it before, three things have to align: a good cast, a good director, and good storytelling. This movie had a good cast. Nobody debates that. The rest of it was awful because the story was horrible. It really was. I mean, there's no question about it. There's no debating it. It was just really bad. The directing, there was so much stuff, especially when it comes to CGI. There were certain shots where you're like, they were doing so many, they were trying to, it almost felt like this movie was rushed. And come to find out that they actually did a bunch of reshoots, which shows up in the movie. You can tell. When you have when a story is aligned, you can tell. You can watch a story go, and you're like, okay, everything is connected. Everything seems seamless. But in this movie, you'd go from one scene to another, and you're like, I don't understand what's going on here. They're trying to mesh so many things together, and clearly you can see this in this movie, and it did not work. Now, you have people like Dakota Johnson blaming the fact that she actually came out and said that the movie that she saw in the beginning, the script that she saw, was outstanding, but that's not exactly what they got. That's not the movie they made. And she also said that she was led to believe that Madam Web would be part of Marvel moving forward, like what the Marvel universe, that's the story that's being put out there right now. So she felt like she was misled. You have Isabella Merced, who I like, and will actually be in James Gunn's Superman as Hawkgirl. If you don't know now, she'll be Hawkgirl in Superman Legacy. Superman, excuse me. They just changed it. She came out and said that she's blaming men for the reason this movie didn't do well. She blames men. She says that men really didn't want this movie to do well. Not just Madam Web, the Marvels, also Birds of Prey. which to me is extremely, it's very funny and very, not only ignorant, but she sounds very petty, and at the same time, she's very uninformed. For starters, you cannot blame men for this movie. I just told you this movie was a bad movie. Horrible story, horrible directing. And I'll give you good examples of, and again, I guess her point is, I guess men don't want female-led movies, especially comic-based movies, to succeed. That is it's a bunch of lies. It is, because you saw Wonder Woman do extremely well. Even the first Captain Marvel, that movie did, I think, over $1 billion. You cannot say that men don't like these movies or men don't want these movies to succeed, because that is a bunch of lies. Okay? Most men, especially most men that are comic fans. Okay? Most men who are comic fans could care less as long as the story aligns with what is in the comics. If, again, I've said it before, you have source material. If you keep to the source material and you direct it well, you write it well, and you cast well, it doesn't matter. People will watch it and it will make a bunch of money. Wonder Woman is a good example of that. The first Wonder Woman made damn near $800 million. And again, it's because it was written well, it was directed well, and they hit a home run in casting Gal Gadot. We all went to see that movie, and it did not matter. And that movie also had a female director in Patty Jenkins. Nobody judged them because this was a female-led movie. That movie was outstanding. Outstanding, and that's why it made money. Captain Marvel, again, there's so many mixed feelings about Captain Marvel, but people watched it because that first one, you can say what you want with the cast of Brie Larson, but it was a good movie. It was a decent movie, and the numbers told you and showed you that this was a good movie. So this argument that men are the ones who don't want these movies to succeed is a bunch of BS, and it really is, because they do not care. You saw female-led, you saw men, you saw a bunch of movies that were led by men. Black Adam tanked. It doesn't matter how much star power he has in The Rock, but that was a horrible movie. My expectation for that movie was through the roof, but the writing, the story was horrible. That movie was bad, and it did not make money. It didn't matter that it was The Rock. His name could not make this movie make money. It did not matter because, again, people like the content, the source material. If you do well in writing, directing, and casting, if all those things come together, it does not matter. That movie will succeed. You saw a movie like The Flash. You saw Shazam! They didn't do well. And it's not because of anything else outside of the stories, and the directing was just horrible, and they didn't do well. And that is simply the case. So, to me, Madam Web didn't do well because, again, it only got one of the three. It only got good casting, but it didn't get good stories or good storytelling or good writing, and it also absolutely didn't get good directing. That is the reason it did not do well. So I don't care what anybody else says. You can watch this movie and you will judge it for yourself. I'll say it once, I'll say it again. Yes, most men majority of comic book fans are men. It is the truth. Right now you do have a lot of female fans. Yes, but in the comic world, like historically or traditionally, most men have been fans of comic-based movies. And let me tell you something. Ask anybody that collects or reads comic books. They love comic books. They do. It's because, there's a storyline. There's source material. There are things that really stay unique in comic books. So when you come up and say, hey, we're going to do Madam Web, there's somewhere where we can go get source material for those of you who are comic book fans, and we know what's there. We know what's expected, and oftentimes they bring several comic books together to tell a story of a movie. And you look at Batman versus Superman. I mean, Zack Snyder basically copied a whole bunch of what he brought into Batman versus Superman from The Dark Knight. Okay, and which is an incredible book. If you haven't read or watched that movie, those two movies are outstanding. But you can literally watch this movie and go back to the comic book, the graphic novel, and say, I can see what he's trying, and that's why it did so well. So this narrative that it's men who don't want these movies to succeed is absolute BS. It is, and it's an argument that goes nowhere. So again, just to wrap it up, this movie with somewhat high expectations, because female-led movie was just not done well. And they can blame everybody they want, but those two things with directing and writing just didn't show up. And again, that's just my 2 cents. If you haven't watched the movie, I always encourage people to watch it. Don't blame me if you don't like it, but it is what it is. Anyway, that's a wrap. I'll see you again on the next episode of The African Comic Guy. Peace.